Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In this recording, I'm going to talk about some of the problems that are outlined rather for you in Schaefer Landau's book regarding the desire satisfaction theory. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about two of the central claims of desire satisfaction theory. Now, these might look really similar to each other, but they have radically different implications, and I'll try to explain to you why briefly here. First one is A, the second one is B. A reads, if something's good for you, then it fulfills your desire. B reads, if something fulfills your desire, then it is good for you, or however you want to change the personal pronoun there. So if A says if something's good for you, then it fulfills our desires. And now how are you supposed to read this? Okay. Well, you notice that in the first part after the if here, it says if something's good for us, then it fulfills your desires. Well, this part right here, the good for us part, this is what we call in logic a sufficient condition. So what this means is that if something's good for you, that's good enough to give you this whatever comes after the then. So if something's good for you, this is sufficient or good enough to give you a fulfilling of your desire. Now the second part right here, the after the then part, this is what we call a necessary condition. So a necessary condition means that it's a requirement for this part over here, the sufficient condition. So so put it like this: if you have your driver's license, sufficient condition, then you've passed the written test, necessary condition. If you have your driver's license, you've passed the written test. Okay. Now, what if someone says to you, you haven't passed the written test? What does that tell you about whether or not you have your driver's license? Well, it tells you you do not have your driver's license. And the reason is because written test is a requirement for obtaining your driver's license. The same is true here in a way that logic works out. If something's good for you, then it fulfills your desire. Fulfilling your desire here is a requirement for something being good for you in desire satisfaction theory. Okay, so if something's good for you, that's good enough to give you the fact that it fulfilled your desire. But if something doesn't fulfill your desire, then it's good enough for you to know that it's not good for you. So what this means is that fulfilling your desire is a requirement for it being good for you. And something being good for you is good enough to get you the fact that it fulfilled your desire. So sufficient condition, so this right here, something is good enough for you, is a sufficient condition for it fulfilling your desire. Now down here you have it the other way around. If something fulfills our desires, then it's good for us. Here, fulfilling your desire is a sufficient condition for it to be good for you. So this reads then, if I have my driver's license, then, or sorry, if I pass a written test, then I have my driver's license or something. Now, that clearly isn't true, but um, you get the idea. So we've switched them around. So what this is saying is that if something fulfills your desires, that's good enough for you to know that it's good for you. But if it's not good for you, then you know that it didn't fulfill your desire. Um, what this means is that fulfilling your desire is both a sufficient condition, it's good enough to get you the fact that it's good for you, and it's a necessary condition. It's required for it to be good for you. So to object to desire satisfaction theory, then you have to point out that something does not fulfill your desire, and it's good for you. Because what you need to do is show, like in the driver's license case. So recall, if I have my driver's license, then I pass the written test. To show that I don't have my driver's license, what I need to show is that I didn't pass my written test in that sentence. Okay, so I need to deny, sorry, I need to deny this part that it fulfills my desires. So if I can show that something does not fulfill my desire, but but it is good for me, then A is false. Likewise, if I can show that something's good for me, but it doesn't fulfill my desire, then I can show that B is false. So up here, if I can show something does not fulfill my desire and is good for me, then A is false. If I can show that something is not good for me, um, but it fulfills my desires, then I can show that B is false. So that's what we're going to do here. So let's look on. So this claim, this argument goes against A. If something's good for us, then it fulfills our desires. And Schaefer-Landau says, well, look, a windfall tax rebate is an unexpected or an unexpected kind remark, the flattering interest of a charming stranger. These are all things that don't fulfill your desire necessarily because you don't have any pre-existing desire for a tax rebate or for an unexpected kind remark, or it wasn't a present desire of you, right? Because recall that desire satisfaction theory says that you have to have that it's if you are fulfilling your desires, then it's good for you, right? But the thing is that these aren't desires that you might not presently have a desire to be flattered by a stranger or receive a tax rebate or something, but they're certainly good for you. So these don't satisfy any pre-existing desires, but it certainly makes sense to say you're better off because of any of these types of things. And so this shows that this Schaefer-Landau thinks shows that if it doesn't fulfill your desire, but it is good for you. Okay. Next, uh, testing claim A. Again, if something is good for you, then it fulfills your desire. But consider, he says, small children and the severely disabled. A parent can give her child a vaccine, and it will benefit him. This will benefit him even if he does not want it, and even if he doesn't understand that he will want the benefits later. But the thing is that um, so this doesn't fulfill his desire. He has a desire to not get that needle stuck in his arm or something. But it certainly is good for him. So what this means is then this example right here denies this part, uh, denies that it fulfills the desire. So it does not fulfill his desire, but at the same time, it is good for him. So what this means is then that if something's good for you, it's not the case that it fulfills your desires every time, because sometimes something can fulfill your desire and not be good for you. So remember this right here, the fulfilling your desire part is a requirement for something to be good for you. And being good for you then is good enough to let you know that it fulfills your desire. But here, it doesn't fulfill your desire, but it is good for you. And so this means then that the statement A has to be false. Next example, a psychologist can give a patient a course of treatment that will benefit her by improving her well-being, even if she doesn't want it, right? So this is something similar. Uh, so if someone is mentally ill or something, then the patient might not want the treatment that's suggested by her psychologist. Or if someone's disabled or something, they might not understand it. Nevertheless, it will improve the person's well-being if they go through with the treatment. So this is another case of denying the uh, consequent here, denying the necessary condition, denying that it fulfills your desires. So again, for A to be true, then if I deny it fulfills my desires, I also have to deny that it's good for me. Just like the driver's license case. If I have my driver's license, then I pass my written test. But to show that I don't have my driver's license, what I have to show, all I need to do is show that I didn't pass my written test. So I would say if I have my driver's license, I pass the written test. Then the next line would say I did not pass the written test, and the conclusion would be therefore I do not have my driver's license. In this case, A, if something's good for us, then it fulfills our desires. If I say it did not fulfill my desire, then I'm required to say that it is not good for me or is not good for us or whatever. The problem is that I can just because something doesn't fulfill my just because something doesn't fulfill my desire or goes against something I want, it doesn't mean that it's not good for me. And so claim A has to be false. The next claim that's related to A, suicidal people, those who are depressed may decide that it would be better if they weren't alive anymore. But this isn't true. I mean, if you are dead, then there isn't, then you're not around to have a life so it's not good for you at all because there's no you there. Presuming, I suppose, that when you die, there's no heaven or something, right? And that's a whole nother class that um, we can't dive into. But if you want to learn about that, take my philosophy of religion class in the spring. Anyway, so if something's good for you, then it fulfills our desires. Those who are depressed may decide that it's better off if they're gone. This can't be the case if there's no heaven or something. Therefore, there is no you to be around for it to be good for. Preventing suicide, uh, preventing them from fulfilling their wishes, that is, to be dead, will make them better off, right? Some people may decide later that it's a good thing that they didn't commit suicide, but this after the fact type of approval doesn't do anything to support the desire of satisfaction in the moment, right? So remember that I have a desire for pizza, therefore it's good for me to get it because it's always good for me to get what I desire. Um, but it doesn't seem to be the case, at least with regard to suicidal people, so far as Schaefer Landau is concerned. There also seems to be a lot of cases where our desires are satisfied, but we're not made better off. And this kind of objection refers to the second statement, B. If something fulfills our desires, then it's good for us. But if something fulfills our desires and it's not good for us, then we can clearly see that fulfilling our desires is not a sufficient condition for making us better off. So let's go ahead and look at the next slide. The satisfaction of desires based on a false belief doesn't make us better off, but this false belief isn't included in our definition yet. So it might happen that you want a certain job, right? And this job looks super awesome and everyone acts as if they love the job, but it turns out that people in this job are miserable and are really unhappy, but they're just excellent liars. But you don't find this out until you get that job, right? So you really want a certain job, and and you go into this job, and then you realize it dawns on you, oh shoot, right? My life stinks now, but my desires were fulfilled. So people will go ahead and adjust their theory then to account for this. They'll say, see, if something fulfills our desires, if something fulfills rather our informed desires, those that are not based on false beliefs, then that thing is good for us. And that seems to solve that kind of problem, the false desires based on false beliefs. But there's another issue that's kind of this related to this, and so we'll move on. The satisfaction desires for well-being of others does not always make us better off. And so Schaefer Landau gives us an example of a beached whale. He's watching TV, he sees a whale at the beach, right? And he's like, I really would like that whale to be saved. And then it turns out that whale was saved. And so he says that, my desire was fulfilled, but it really isn't clear how that the satisfaction of desire improved his life. You need to have some sort of account for specifying how my desire for someone else's well-being being fulfilled improves my life overall. And it's not really clear how that can work. So the desire satisfaction person can reply and say something like this: his life, Sanford Landau's life, was improved because his life was a bit more pleasurable because he got what he desired. But the problem with this kind of reply is it's not really available to the desire satisfaction theorist because desire satisfaction theory does not assign any sort of intrinsic value to pleasure. It's the just about satisfying your desires. So if they want to say, well, you had more pleasure because your desire was satisfied, then their theory seems to imply hedonism rather than desire satisfaction theory. And you want to make these two things different. So desire satisfaction theory could reply and say, um, or sorry, desire satisfaction theory says your life goes better for you just so long as more of your desires are satisfied. But this is regardless. regardless of the amount of pleasure it brings to you. And in this vein, though, they're going to modify their theory a little bit to D. So they're going to talk about self-regarding desires. So something that, so they're going to, they from B, A and B, they're going to add two things. One, informed desires, so it's not based on false beliefs. And another one is self-regarding desires. So if something fulfills your informed self-regarding desires, then that thing is good for you. A self-regarding desire is that which is concerned for yourself. And so, since the desire for the whale's well-being was not a self-regarding one, it doesn't count as a counterexample to D. And D is the one that's important. It has to be self-regarding, they'll say. But what about disappointment? So imagine getting everything you want, right? So you get the job you want, you get the mate you want, you get the house you want, but then you're completely miserable. And this seems like that occurs, right? Um, it doesn't seem that satisfying desires always makes you better off, even if they're informed and they're self-regarding. Because a lot of times you have a desire, you fulfill it, but then you still feel empty inside. And so it seems there's a problem there with disappointment as well. An example could be this. Imagine that you want to become a pilot. You've worked really hard your whole life to become one, and the day finally comes when you're hired by some airline or something. But then, rather than being incredibly happy, you're really disappointed. All this build up for your whole life of training to be a pilot, and then you find yourself in a state of disappointment. It's hard to see that getting this desire fulfilled does anything to make your life go better for you in this case. And these disappointment types of cases really seem to be realistic cases as well. The reason this is a problem is because desire satisfaction theory says that if your desire is satisfied, then it improves your overall well-being. But if your desire is satisfied, but then you're incredibly disappointed, it's not clear how that's true. So we're going to modify the theory a little bit according to E. If something has fulfilled your informed, self-regarding desire and we're pleased as a result of this desire, then it's good for us. But the problem is that desire satisfaction theory, as you recall, rejects objective standards. So hedonism has an objective standard, namely pleasure or happiness. The desire satisfaction theory just says that satisfying desires is what makes your life happy or makes your life go well for you. Being pleased, according to our last modification, is a good, and that fits neatly with hedonism, but not with desire satisfaction theory. In a case getting what you want makes you worse off, it would appear that unless you resort to some sort of objective standard like hedonism, desire satisfaction theory will have a good time. Will have a hard time rather. And so it's difficult to make sense of the cases where you have an informed self-regarding desire and you're disappointed or your life isn't better. Um, it's not clear how to make sense of that type of case. So if I have an informed self-regarding desire, but then and it's fulfilled, and then I'm disappointed, how has fulfilling that desire made my life go well? By adding on pleasure to that, you've reduced desire satisfaction theory to hedonism. And again, desire satisfaction theory is a different type of theory than hedonism, so that is not going to work. Case that's important to Schaefer-Landau is imagine that you have a desire fulfilled. So imagine you have an informed desire. Imagine that it's self-regarding, and imagine it's fulfilled. So, for example, I want a son, and I want a son for whatever reasons. Like I think it would be really great, and it's about me. I want the son. But imagine this is fulfilled. You never find out about it, right? You never learn about it. But a satisfaction of desires doesn't make you better off unless you know about it as well, right? So you need something else added. Maybe you need something like informed, self-regarding desires that got fulfilled or something. But our last modification, our second to last modification, D, informed self regarding desires being fulfilled isn't sufficient for making your life go better. And it's not sufficient for one reason, because you can have a life of disappointment, right? As we saw with the commercial pilot example. But it's also doesn't isn't sufficient for making your life go better, because you might not know that your desire is satisfied, so you're going to need something else as well. So this brings us to our next objection that Schaefer Landau brings up, and this is the impoverished desires. Desires are shaped by your environmental conditions and your upbringing. And some people have low expectations, or they lower their expectations, and desire little out of life. So imagine a case where someone's a slave or something like that. It might be that you have a desire to serve your master. So imagine you raised as a slave and you have a desire to serve your master. At this point, someone's going to object. Well, look, hey, that's not right. Slavery is wrong. And of course, slavery is wrong. But we're not evaluating rightness or wrongness of things at this point. What we're talking about is what makes someone's life go well for them. And desire satisfaction theory, as you recall, only says if your informed self-regarding desires are fulfilled, then you are having a good life. And so desire satisfaction does not put any objective value or objective intrinsic value on freedom. The only valuable thing there is for you to fulfill your desires. So if you have low expectations, then you're going, or low expectations, if you have low desires and low expectations of your life, then your life might be better according to them. So maybe they say your desire is that you get out of bed in the morning and you tie your shoes. Bam, you did it. The more your desires are fulfilled, the better your life's going to go. So I want to iron my shirt today. Boom, I did it. Boom, yes, my life is going really well for me. There's a worse problem, right? So say that you are a sex slave. Not you, because that would be terrible, but imagine a sex slave. And now this sex slave, even if his desires are satisfied, it doesn't seem as if the person's life is going well for him or her, right? A life of a sex slave hardly seems to be a good life of a free and healthy, as it doesn't seem to be as good as one of a free and healthy individual. And this seems to be a clear problem for desire satisfaction theory. If a value theory is proposing something that seems very counterintuitive, um, then that's evidence against the theory. We don't think that people who are a sex slave, lives are going really well for them. That's why we want to free them of it. Now imagine that someone's a sex slave and he or she happens to be liking it, right? But it doesn't mean that their life is going well for them. Not that they're liking it, because that's now we're turning to hedonism. Imagine that they have desires that are being fulfilled in it, right? It seems different though. It seems to be have a much better life for them if they were free and healthy individuals than if they were condemned to this type of servitude. This brings us to the next objection of self-sacrifice or self-harm. If desire satisfaction theory is correct, intentional self-sacrifice or self-harm are impossible. But certainly self-harm and self-sacrifice do seem possible. Now consider this case. If someone desires to harm himself or sacrifice himself, and he fulfills this desire, then he's better off, according to desire satisfaction theory. But if you are truly harmed, this implies that you're not better off, right? If I am truly harmed, my life has been hindered in a way, right? That's kind of by definition. If harming yourself satisfies your desires, you have done something that benefits yourself. Okay? You are not harmed in that case. So you're harmed and not harmed at the same time. Therefore, there's a contradiction between 2 and 3. If you desire to harm yourself and you succeed, then you've benefited yourself. And you are not harmed. And you have not harmed yourself. But I hope you see the problem here. If you're harming yourself, and harming yourself is really not harming yourself, then you've harmed and not harmed yourself at the same time, in the same way, in the same sense, which is a contradiction. And contradictions can't obtain, right? They can't be real. You can't have round triangles or circular triangles. You can't have um, be here and not here at the same time, in the same sense, in the same way. 2 plus 2 in a 10-base system cannot be 45. You can't harm and not harm yourself in the same way, in the same sense, in the same regard at the same time. But this is what desire satisfaction theory seems to imply. If you desire to sacrifice yourself to a larger cause, then you've really made yourself better off. But then a problem arises. You can't really self-sacrifice. Because if you're doing something to make yourself better off, then you're not self-sacrificing, right? If I give money to someone, so say I'm trying to impress someone, and that person's with me, and I know that this person really values charity or something, and I see someone asking for money, and the reason I give that person money is because I know I'll impress the person next to me. Well, then I haven't self-sacrificed when I give the money away. I've made some sort of transaction in my favor. Um, and so it seems like self-sacrifice is impossible if desire satisfaction theory is true. Now, at this point, someone might say, does this really work as an argument against desire satisfaction theory? So if we harken back to modified theory D, then it seems like this might not be a problem. Remember D, if something fulfills our informed self-regarding desires, then that thing is good for us. But given D, it seems that there isn't a problem with self-sacrifice, right? Because self-sacrifice then just it fits neatly with this definition, right? Uh, if is there really a problem with self-sacrifice in desire satisfaction theory when we're talking about D? Because self-sacrificing then will just change kind of the meaning a little bit. But this kind of reply isn't going to work either, because the main claim isn't that what we call self-sacrificing isn't really self-sacrificing. The claim is that, look, there's such thing as self-sacrificing, but given desire satisfaction theory, self-sacrifice is actually impossible. And so this type of reply isn't going to work. Another problem with desire satisfaction theory is the fallibility of our deepest desires. So say we're informed, we know what's going on, we know what our desires are, and we know the reality of them, and they're self-regarding and all that. Well, this still seems to be some sort of a rationality charge that can be made against desire satisfaction theory. Because according to desire satisfaction theory, no desire is better than any other one. And you can't deny this as a desire satisfaction theorist. If you deny this, then you've moved on to one of the objective theories of welfare, like hedonism or another, or virtue ethics. But it really does seem to be the case, though, that some desires are intrinsically better than others. Consider these cases. Say a person is deeply depressed because his lover has left. He wants to kill himself. Well, it seems hard to believe that someone's life can go better for them if they're dead, because they're not alive anymore, right? So there's nothing to go better. Most people wouldn't say, hey, you know what, you should kill yourself because it's the desire you have. That is not what people would say. Most people would challenge this person to change his desire. If he changes his desire, then he would be better off, right? That's the claim. If he does this, he will be much better off, because his current desire for ending his own life is bringing him a lot of misery. So he should change his desire to something else if he can. The problem is that, according to desire satisfaction theory, stuff only matters insofar as one cares about them. Happiness is only important to the extent that one wants it. So misery isn't really important here. If someone wants to die, if someone if someone wants to feel bad, or someone desires to feel bad, if someone wants to die, then what matters to desire satisfaction theory is that those desires are met. So you can't tell a person to change his desires, remember, because they are his desires, not your desires. So at bottom, then, the desire satisfaction theorist has to claim that if you want to die, then you're better off dead, which seems to be really odd because, like I've said a few times now, there's no such thing as your life going well for you if you're dead. The reason is because when you're dead, that's it, you're gone. You're not there anymore. At least if heaven isn't real or there's no afterlife that's beneficial. Another good example of the fallibility of your deepest desires is like, what if someone really wants to be publicly humiliated? Like they have the desire for that. Um, but this seems odd, right? To be publicly humiliated doesn't really seem to be something that people that would make someone's life go better for them. But according to desire satisfaction theory, this would be best for him if he was publicly humiliated because it would make his life go well, right? Um, but this can't be the case, right? To be publicly humiliated is necessarily a bad thing, people tend to think. And if someone wants to be either publicly humiliated, either they think humiliation is funny and they're trying to make a joke, and so they're not actually humiliated. Because humiliation is a self-regarding type of thing, right? You are humiliated. It's it's a psychological characteristic of you, right? It's something subjective to you. If you are humiliated, then you have this deep sense of humiliation, which is a negative trait, and that's going to make your life go poorly for you. Um, but desire satisfaction theory can't make those types of claims because if one really wants to then be humiliated, then that's what should happen. But the problem is, as I've hinted at in this short slide, that if someone wants to be humiliated, then either it's not really humiliation, or their life isn't going to go better for them. And so again, it seems that being humiliated doesn't really seem to be a type of thing that can be possible on desire satisfaction theory. So these are some strong objections to an initially plausible theory, desire satisfaction theory. Now, you have a test you have to do this week. So please make sure to prepare for that test. And if you have any questions, please let me know.